The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Martinez walked through the gates for her first day. At 28, she appeared smaller than most recruits, standing at 5 feet 4 inches with a slender build that made seasoned soldiers shake their heads in doubt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her brown eyes held a quiet determination that few bothered to notice. General Marcus Thompson was reviewing the new batch of recruits when his assistant handed him Sarah's file. He barely glanced at it before tossing it aside with a dismissive grunt. "Another one trying to prove a point," he muttered, his weathered face showing clear disapproval. At 55, Thompson had spent 3 decades in the military, rising through the ranks with an iron fist and traditional views about who belonged on the battlefield. The general had earned his reputation as a tough commander who broke weak soldiers and forged strong ones. His methods were harsh but effective, at least according to his own standards. He believed that warfare was no place for those he considered physically inferior, and in his mind, women fell squarely into that category. Sarah's background told a different story than her appearance suggested. Born in a rough neighborhood in Detroit, she had learned early that survival meant being tougher than those around her. Her father, a former Marine, had disappeared when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise 3 children alone. Sarah became the protector of her younger siblings, fighting off bullies and working multiple jobs to help support the family. Her path to the military hadn't been traditional. After high school, she worked as a security guard while attending community college at night. It was during a violent robbery attempt at her workplace that Sarah's natural instincts emerged. She had disarmed the gunman and held him until police arrived, using techniques she had learned from watching her father's old training videos and practicing in secret. The incident caught the attention of a military recruiter who witnessed the event. He saw something in Sarah that others missed, a combination of quick thinking, physical capability, and mental toughness that couldn't be taught. After months of persuasion, Sarah agreed to enlist, driven by a desire to serve her country and prove that strength came in many forms. Now, standing in the morning formation with dozens of other recruits, Sarah felt the weight of skeptical stares. The other soldiers whispered among themselves, making bets about how long she would last. Some gave her a week, others were more generous with a month. None expected her to complete the rigorous training program. General Thompson approached the formation with his usual commanding presence. His voice boomed across the training ground as he addressed the new recruits. "Welcome to hell," he began, his eyes scanning the group with practiced assessment. "Most of you won't make it through the first month. Some of you shouldn't even be here." His gaze lingered on Sarah longer than the others, and she felt the intensity of his disapproval. Thompson had seen too many recruits who thought they could succeed on determination alone, only to crumble under the physical and mental pressure of military training. In his experience, those who looked least capable usually were exactly that. The first week of training was brutal by design. Recruits were pushed to their physical limits with grueling exercises, long marches, and combat drills. Sleep was limited, food was basic, and stress was constant. The instructors looked for any sign of weakness, ready to eliminate those who couldn't handle the pressure. Sarah struggled with some of the physical challenges, particularly those that required pure strength. During rope climbing exercises, she watched larger recruits scale the ropes with ease while she had to use technique and determination to compensate for her smaller frame. Push-ups were harder, carrying heavy equipment was more challenging, and she often finished exercises just seconds before the time limit. But what Sarah lacked in raw physical power, she made up for in other areas. Her endurance was exceptional, outlasting many larger recruits during long-distance runs. Her accuracy with weapons was among the best in the group. Most importantly, she never quit, never complained, and never asked for special treatment. General Thompson observed these early weeks with growing irritation. He had expected Sarah to wash out quickly, providing a clear example to others about the realities of military service. Instead, she persisted, adapting and improving with each passing day. Her refusal to quit challenged his fundamental beliefs about what made an effective soldier. During the second week, a particularly challenging obstacle course was designed to test both physical capability and mental resilience. The course included climbing walls, crawling through mud under barbed wire, carrying heavy packs over long distances, and navigating complex puzzles under time pressure. Sarah approached each obstacle methodically, using her smaller size to her advantage when possible, and pushing through sheer willpower when it wasn't. She watched other recruits attempt the course, learning from their successes and failures. When her turn came, she moved with calculated precision rather than brute force. The wall climb that defeated several larger recruits became manageable when Sarah used proper technique rather than relying solely on upper body strength. The crawling section, which exhausted others, played to her compact frame and flexibility. The heavy pack carry was still difficult, but her exceptional cardiovascular fitness allowed her to maintain a steady pace while others faltered. By the time Sarah completed the obstacle course, she had posted the third best time of the day. Several recruits who had initially dismissed her began to take notice. The instructors started paying closer attention to her performance, noting her consistent improvement and unwavering determination. General Thompson was less impressed. To him, Sarah's success was an anomaly, a temporary achievement that would inevitably be followed by failure when the real challenges began. He decided it was time to apply more pressure, to create situations where her perceived weaknesses would be exposed definitively. The third week brought combat training, including hand-to-hand fighting exercises. Thompson personally oversaw these sessions, pairing recruits against each other in controlled but intense sparring matches. He made sure to match Sarah against some of the largest and strongest recruits, expecting to finally demonstrate her limitations. The first match pitted Sarah against Jake Morrison, a former college football player who stood 6'3" and weighed over 200 pounds. The other recruits gathered around the training mat, most expecting to see Sarah overwhelmed quickly. Even some of the instructors seemed uncomfortable with the obvious mismatch. What happened next surprised everyone except Sarah herself. She had spent countless hours studying combat techniques, understanding that her success would depend on skill rather than strength. When Jake charged forward with brute force, Sarah used his momentum against him, stepping aside and using leverage to send him tumbling to the mat. The match continued for several minutes, with Jake trying to use his size advantage while Sarah employed speed, technique, and strategic thinking. She absorbed some hits but gave as good as she got, targeting pressure points and using joint manipulation techniques that neutralized her opponent's strength advantage. When the match ended, Sarah had scored more points than Jake, winning on technique and tactical awareness. The watching recruits were stunned into silence, while the instructors exchanged glances of surprise and grudging respect. General Thompson's jaw tightened as he watched Sarah help Jake to his feet with genuine sportsmanship. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. In his worldview, physical dominance determined military capability, and Sarah's victory challenged that fundamental assumption. Over the following days, Sarah faced increasingly difficult opponents, each chosen by Thompson to expose what he saw as her inevitable breaking point. But each match only demonstrated her growing confidence and skill. She learned from every encounter, adapted to different fighting styles, and consistently performed better than expected. Her success began to influence other recruits. Those who had initially dismissed her started seeking her advice on technique and strategy. Her quiet leadership style and willingness to help others created a bond among the group that transcended physical differences. Thompson noticed this growing influence and saw it as a threat to proper military hierarchy. In his view, leadership should be based on traditional measures of strength and dominance, not on the collaborative approach that Sarah naturally employed. As the fourth week began, Sarah had not only survived the initial training phase, but had emerged as one of the top performers in her class. Her weapon scores were consistently high, her endurance was exceptional, and her tactical thinking impressed even skeptical instructors. Most importantly, she had earned the respect of her fellow recruits through performance rather than posturing. But General Thompson remained unconvinced and increasingly frustrated. He had built his career on clear hierarchies and traditional measures of military capability. Sarah's success challenged everything he believed about effective military service, and he was determined to restore what he saw as proper order. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only Sarah's physical and mental toughness, but also the very foundations of what it meant to be a warrior. Thompson was preparing to take direct action, convinced that his experience and authority gave him the right to make judgments about who deserved to serve. Sarah, meanwhile, continued to focus on her training and improvement, unaware that her success had marked her as a target. She had come too far and overcome too much to be deterred by skepticism or prejudice. Her journey from the streets of Detroit to military training had taught her that true strength came from within, and she was ready to prove that lesson to anyone who doubted it. The foundation had been laid for a confrontation that would reveal the true character of both the general and the recruit he so desperately wanted to dismiss. Sarah's quiet determination was about to meet Thompson's rigid authority, and the outcome would surprise everyone who witnessed it. The morning of the confrontation began like any other training day, but tension hung in the air like morning fog. General Thompson had spent the night reviewing Sarah's file again, his frustration growing with each page. Her performance scores were undeniably impressive, but he remained convinced that she was somehow gaming the system or receiving preferential treatment from sympathetic instructors. Sarah arrived at the training facility early, as was her habit. She used the quiet morning hours to practice techniques she found challenging and to mentally prepare for the day ahead. Her dedication had become legendary among the other recruits, who often found her working on skills long after official training hours ended. The day's exercise was supposed to be a comprehensive combat simulation, designed to test everything the recruits had learned during their first month. Teams would navigate through a mock battlefield, complete various objectives, and demonstrate their ability to work together under pressure. It was exactly the kind of challenge that Sarah excelled at, combining physical capability with strategic thinking and teamwork. General Thompson had other plans. He arrived at the training ground with a grim expression and a personal agenda. In his mind, it was time to end what he saw as a charade that had gone on too long. He was determined to expose Sarah's limitations in front of everyone, once and for all. As the recruits assembled for the morning briefing, Thompson's assistant whispered something in his ear that made his expression even darker. The previous day's evaluation reports showed Sarah ranked second overall in her training class, ahead of recruits who had seemed far more promising when they arrived. The simulation began with each team receiving their mission parameters. Sarah's team was assigned to secure a mock enemy position while avoiding simulated landmines and dealing with various obstacles designed to test their combat readiness. She naturally fell into a leadership role, not through aggressive dominance but through her ability to assess situations quickly and communicate effectively with her teammates. General Thompson watched from the command post, his irritation growing as Sarah's team moved efficiently through the course. She had positioned herself at the front of the group, using hand signals to coordinate their movement and demonstrate the kind of tactical awareness that typically took years to develop. When her team encountered a complex obstacle that required both strength and strategy to overcome, Sarah didn't hesitate to take on the most dangerous role. A simulated enemy position needed to be neutralized, and the approach required someone to crawl through a narrow passage while under imaginary fire. Larger team members couldn't fit through the space, but Sarah's compact frame made her the logical choice. What happened next would be replayed in the minds of witnesses for years to come. As Sarah emerged from the passage to signal the all-clear to her team, General Thompson stepped into the training area. His face was red with anger, and his voice carried across the entire facility as he began shouting. "This is exactly what's wrong with today's military," he bellowed, pointing directly at Sarah. "We're lowering standards to accommodate people who have no business being here. You think this is some kind of game where participation trophies matter?" The entire training facility went silent. Other teams stopped their exercises to watch as the general continued his tirade. Sarah stood perfectly still, maintaining military bearing despite the personal attack, but her teammates could see the tension in her posture. Thompson strode closer, his voice getting louder with each step. "You want to play soldier? You think your little tricks and techniques make you equal to real warriors? Let me show you what happens when the games end and real strength matters." What happened next shocked everyone present. Without warning, General Thompson drew back his hand and struck Sarah across the face with an open palm. The sound echoed across the training ground like a gunshot, and Sarah staggered backward from the force of the blow. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The watching recruits couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. A commanding officer had physically assaulted a trainee without provocation, crossing every line of military protocol and basic human decency. Sarah recovered her balance quickly, her hand moving instinctively to her reddening cheek. But instead of cowering or breaking down as Thompson had expected, she straightened to full attention and looked him directly in the eyes. There was no fear in her gaze, only a cold determination that sent a chill through everyone watching. "Sir," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite what had just happened. "Is there something specific about my performance that needs improvement?" Her calm response in the face of such unprovoked aggression demonstrated a level of self-control that impressed even the most skeptical observers. But it also revealed something else. A dangerous composure that suggested Sarah was far more than she appeared to be. General Thompson, expecting her to break down or fight back emotionally, was momentarily thrown off balance by her professional response. His anger flared even higher as he realized his assault had failed to achieve its intended effect. "Don't you dare lecture me about performance," he snarled, raising his hand again. "I've seen your type before. All talk and fancy moves until you meet someone who won't play your games." This time, when Thompson's hand came down toward Sarah's face, something extraordinary happened. Moving with lightning speed, Sarah caught his wrist in midair, her grip tight enough to stop his attack cold. The general's eyes widened in surprise as he realized he couldn't complete the strike. "Sir," Sarah said, still maintaining her respectful tone despite the circumstances, "I would prefer not to escalate this situation." But Thompson, his authority challenged in front of dozens of witnesses, tried to use his free hand to grab Sarah's throat. What followed was a display of skill and controlled violence that left everyone speechless. Sarah moved like liquid lightning, deflecting Thompson's second attack while simultaneously applying pressure to specific points on his captured wrist. The general gasped in pain as she used leverage and technique to force him to his knees, his own momentum working against him. In less than 10 seconds, General Thompson found himself on the ground, his arm twisted behind his back in a perfect submission hold. Sarah maintained just enough pressure to keep him immobilized without causing permanent damage, demonstrating the kind of restraint that separated professionals from amateurs. The watching recruits and instructors stared in stunned silence as Sarah held the general in position effortlessly. Her breathing wasn't even elevated, suggesting that subduing him had required minimal effort on her part. "Sir," Sarah said calmly, "I'm going to release you now. I hope we can discuss any concerns about my performance through proper channels." As she let go and stepped back, General Thompson struggled to his feet, his face now pale with shock rather than red with anger. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. He had been completely outmatched by the recruit he had so confidently dismissed, but the story was far from over. As Thompson regained his footing, other figures began appearing at the edge of the training ground. Word of the confrontation had spread quickly through the base, and senior officers were arriving to investigate the disturbance. Among them was Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander whose expression grew darker with each witness account she received. Behind her came several other high-ranking officers, including some who wore insignia that most of the recruits didn't recognize. What none of the trainees knew, and what General Thompson was about to discover to his horror, was that Sarah Martinez was not just another recruit trying to prove herself. Her file contained information that was classified at levels far above Thompson's clearance, and her presence at the training facility was part of a much larger operation. As the senior officers approached, Sarah maintained her military bearing while Thompson struggled to regain his composure and authority. He began to bluster about insubordination and assault, trying to spin the situation in his favor. "Colonel Hayes," he began, his voice shaking with indignation, "this recruit attacked a superior officer. I demand immediate disciplinary action." But Colonel Hayes wasn't looking at Sarah with disapproval. Instead, her expression showed a mixture of concern and barely controlled anger as she studied General Thompson. When she spoke, her voice was ice-cold with authority. "General Thompson, you are to report to my office immediately. Do not speak to any witnesses, do not file any reports, and do not take any action regarding this incident until further notice." As Thompson opened his mouth to protest, another figure stepped forward from the group of arriving officers. This man wore the insignia of Naval Special Warfare Command, and his presence on an Army training base immediately raised questions about what was really happening. "General," the Navy officer said quietly, "I think you need to understand exactly who you just assaulted." The color drained from Thompson's face as the implications began to sink in. His eyes darted between Sarah, who remained at perfect attention, and the growing group of senior officers, whose expressions ranged from disappointed to furious. Sarah's true identity and purpose were about to be revealed, and General Thompson was beginning to realize that his career and freedom might be in serious jeopardy. The recruit he had dismissed as weak was about to be revealed as something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The confrontation had ended, but the real reckoning was just beginning. Thompson's world was about to be turned upside down as he learned the truth about the woman he had so foolishly underestimated. The consequences of his actions would extend far beyond a simple disciplinary hearing, and his future hung in the balance as powerful forces began to align against him. Sarah remained silent and professional, but those who knew her true background understood that she was capable of far more than she had demonstrated. The general had awakened something that would change both their lives forever. The tension in Colonel Hayes' office was thick enough to cut with a knife as the truth began to unfold. General Thompson sat rigidly in his chair, still trying to process what had happened on the training ground. Across from him, several senior officers reviewed classified files that painted a very different picture of Sarah Martinez than anyone had imagined. Commander James Rodriguez of Naval Special Warfare Command spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of authority and barely controlled anger. "General Thompson, do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, unable to form a coherent response. The confidence and bluster that had defined his career for 30 years had evaporated in the face of circumstances beyond his comprehension. "Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez," Rodriguez continued, "is one of the most decorated Navy SEALs in active service. She has completed multiple classified missions in hostile territory, saved countless lives, and earned commendations from the highest levels of military leadership." The words hit Thompson like physical blows. Navy SEAL, the elite of the elite, warriors trained to operate in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. He had struck a Navy SEAL and then tried to assault her again, only to be subdued like a child throwing a tantrum. Colonel Hayes opened Sarah's real file, revealing a service record that would make most career military officers envious. Multiple Purple Hearts, Silver Stars, and commendations for valor under fire. Combat deployments to locations that couldn't be named in open conversation. Leadership roles in operations that had changed the course of international conflicts. "She's here," Hayes explained, "as part of a joint training evaluation program. Her mission was to assess the effectiveness of our basic training protocols and identify areas for improvement. She was specifically instructed to blend in with regular recruits to get an accurate picture of the training environment." Thompson felt his world collapsing around him. Every assumption he had made, every prejudice he had acted upon, every moment of condescension and aggression had been directed at someone whose combat experience dwarfed his own, a woman who had proven her worth in actual warfare while he had spent recent years behind a desk. "The question now," Rodriguez said, leaning forward with predatory intensity, "is how we handle the fact that a general officer physically assaulted one of my SEALs during a routine training exercise." Sarah herself had been quietly standing at attention throughout the meeting, her expression neutral despite the revelation swirling around her. When Colonel Hayes asked her to speak, she maintained her professional demeanor even as she recounted the events leading up to the confrontation. "Sir," she began, addressing her comments to Rodriguez, "General Thompson appeared to have concerns about my performance and suitability for military service. When I attempted to address those concerns professionally, the situation escalated beyond normal parameters." Her understated description of being struck and then having to defend herself demonstrated the kind of restraint and professionalism that marked elite military personnel. She wasn't seeking revenge or dramatic justice, she was simply reporting facts and allowing her superiors to determine appropriate action. But the implications of Thompson's actions extended far beyond a simple assault case. His behavior had been witnessed by dozens of recruits and instructors, creating a situation that threatened the integrity of the entire training program. Word was already spreading through the base about what had happened, and rumors were growing wilder with each retelling. Commander Rodriguez turned his attention back to Thompson, who was now visibly sweating despite the office's air conditioning. "General, you have created a situation that threatens operational security, undermines military discipline, and potentially compromises ongoing classified operations." The reality was that Sarah's presence at the facility was part of a larger intelligence operation. Her assessment of training protocols was connected to broader efforts to improve military effectiveness across all branches of service. Thompson's assault had not only injured a decorated warrior, but had potentially damaged national security interests. Colonel Hayes retrieved another file from her desk, this one containing Thompson's own service record. While impressive by normal standards, it paled in comparison to Sarah's actual achievements. More troubling were recent evaluation reports that suggested Thompson's leadership style had become increasingly problematic. General, Hayes said, her voice cold with disappointment. Your performance reviews over the past 3 years show a pattern of inflexibility, inappropriate behavior, and resistance to modernization efforts. This incident appears to be the culmination of deeper issues with your command philosophy. Thompson finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. I didn't know. Her file didn't show any of this information. How was I supposed to know she was a Navy SEAL? Commander Rodriguez's expression hardened even further. That's exactly the point, General. You made assumptions based on physical appearance and personal prejudice. A professional military officer evaluates personnel based on performance and capability, not on stereotypes and bias. The door to the office opened, and another figure entered, Admiral Catherine Stone, whose presence immediately elevated the seriousness of the situation to new heights. Admiral Stone commanded respect throughout the military hierarchy, and her involvement meant that this incident had reached the highest levels of military leadership. Gentlemen, Admiral Stone said, her voice carrying decades of authority, I've been briefed on this situation. General Thompson, your actions today have created a crisis that extends far beyond this training facility. She turned to Sarah, who immediately came to attention. Petty Officer Martinez, please describe your assessment of the training environment prior to today's incident. Sarah's response was measured and professional, outlining both strengths and weaknesses in the current training program. Her observations were detailed and constructive, demonstrating the kind of analytical thinking that had made her valuable in special operations. Most damning for Thompson was Sarah's report of systemic issues with leadership attitudes toward non-traditional recruits. She had documented multiple instances of bias and inappropriate behavior, though she noted that most instructors were professional and effective in their roles. Your conduct, General Thompson, Admiral Stone continued, represents everything that's wrong with outdated military thinking. We cannot afford to waste talent because of personal prejudices or primitive attitudes about what makes an effective warrior. The Admiral's words carried weight that extended beyond the immediate situation. Military leadership had been working for years to modernize training and recruitment practices, recognizing that future conflicts would require diverse skills and backgrounds. Thompson's assault represented a direct challenge to those efforts. Commander Rodriguez added another dimension to the crisis. General, when you struck Petty Officer Martinez, you weren't just assaulting a trainee, you were attacking a Navy SEAL with classified operational knowledge and ongoing security responsibilities. The implications of that action are still being assessed. Thompson's face had gone completely white as the full scope of his mistake became clear. He had not only assaulted a superior warrior but had potentially compromised national security operations through his reckless actions. Admiral Stone outlined the immediate consequences of Thompson's behavior. He would be immediately relieved of command and confined to quarters pending a full investigation. His security clearance would be suspended, and he would face both military and civilian charges for assault. But the personal consequences were only part of the story. The incident would trigger a comprehensive review of training protocols and leadership practices throughout the military system. Sarah's real mission would continue, but now with additional focus on identifying and eliminating the kind of bias that had led to the confrontation. General Thompson, Admiral Stone said in conclusion, you had the privilege of commanding some of our finest young warriors. Instead of nurturing their potential, you allowed personal prejudice to cloud your judgment. Your career is over, but the damage you've done to military readiness and morale will take much longer to repair. As the meeting concluded, Thompson was escorted from the office by military police. His 30-year career had ended in disgrace, destroyed by his inability to recognize talent and his willingness to resort to violence when his authority was challenged. Sarah remained behind to continue discussions about her assessment mission and the changes that would be implemented based on her observations. The incident with Thompson had actually provided valuable data about institutional problems that needed immediate attention. In the days that followed, word of what had really happened spread through proper channels. The recruits who had witnessed the confrontation learned that the quiet woman they had come to respect was actually one of the military's most elite warriors. Their admiration for her only grew as they understood the restraint she had shown in dealing with Thompson's assault. Sarah completed her assessment mission over the following weeks, working with base leadership to implement improvements in training protocols and leadership development. Her recommendations would influence military training for years to come, helping to ensure that future warriors were evaluated based on capability rather than appearance. General Thompson faced court-martial proceedings that would strip him of rank and benefits while potentially resulting in prison time. His assault on a Navy SEAL became a cautionary tale throughout the military about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of professional conduct. The training facility itself underwent significant changes, with new leadership committed to identifying and developing talent wherever it existed. Sarah's example inspired other non-traditional recruits and demonstrated that strength came in many forms. Years later, when military historians studied the incident, they would identify it as a turning point in military culture, the moment when an old-school general's prejudices collided with modern military reality, resulting in a transformation that made the entire system stronger and more effective. Sarah Martinez returned to her regular duties with the Navy SEALs, her cover mission complete, but her impact lasting. She had proven once again that true warriors were defined not by their appearance but by their actions, and that the military's greatest strength lay in recognizing and nurturing talent wherever it was found. The general who had called her weak had learned too late that strength came in many forms, and that underestimating a Navy SEAL was a mistake that could destroy careers and change lives forever.